There is a detail in this story that almost everyone glossed over. A single moment, quietly reported and quickly buried beneath the noise of everything else happening in the Sussex universe at the time, that now, in light of what Samantha Markle has just said publicly, looks entirely different from how it looked before. That detail is what we are going to come back to, because by the end of this conversation, it changes the shape of everything. If you have been following this story for a while and you find yourself frustrated by coverage that either defends Meghan without question or attacks her without fairness, then you might want to stay with me today. What I am going to share is carefully sourced, honestly framed, and I think genuinely worth your time. If that sounds like the kind of royal coverage you have been looking for, I would gently invite you to subscribe, because this is the space where we try to get it right rather than just get it loud. Now, Samantha Markle. For those who have followed the Sussex story from the beginning, Samantha is not a new figure. She's Meghan's half-sister, the daughter of Thomas Markle from his first marriage, a woman who has maintained a persistent and often painful public presence throughout the years of Meghan's royal life and post-royal reinvention. Their relationship, or more accurately, the absence of one, has been well documented. Meghan has described Samantha as someone she barely knew growing up. Samantha has consistently disputed that characterization, arguing that the two shared more of a childhood than Meghan has publicly acknowledged. That dispute has been running for years. Most people who follow the story have, at this point, formed their own view of it and largely moved on. Which is exactly what makes Samantha's new claims so significant, because this time, she is not revisiting old ground. She is saying something specific, something that concerns not Meghan's childhood or her father or the family history that has been argued over in public for so long. She is saying something about Archie, and that is where this story moves into genuinely new territory. And this is the part that most people missed. Samantha Markle's new claims about Archie are not, at their core, about Archie himself. They are about documentation, about records, about the paper trail that surrounds the births and early lives of children born into public families, and the specific questions she is raising about what that trail does and does not show in this particular case. Now, let's be precise here, because precision is everything. Samantha has not provided documentary evidence to support her claims. She has not presented verified records or official documents. What she has done is make public statements in interviews, on social media, through her own channels that raise specific questions and make specific allegations that she says are supported by information in her possession. The claims have not been confirmed, they have not been independently verified, and Meghan's team has not issued a formal, detailed response addressing the specific points Samantha has raised. That last part is where the story gets complicated. Because when credible, documented rebuttals exist, they tend to appear quickly. When a specific claim can be easily disproven with a document or a timeline or a verifiable fact, the communications teams of high-profile public figures generally produce that disproof without excessive delay. It is the cleanest way to kill a story before it grows. What has emerged from Meghan's direction in response to Samantha's latest claims is something more diffuse, a general restatement of Samantha's history of making allegations, a framing of her as someone with a documented pattern of hostile public statements toward her half-sister, references to the legal proceedings between them, Samantha's defamation lawsuit against Meghan, which did not succeed, as evidence of bad faith. All of that context is genuinely relevant. All of it deserves to be in the room when we evaluate what Samantha is saying. A source with a documented history of hostility toward their subject is a source that requires careful handling. That is not a dismissal. It is basic journalistic principle. But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The specific nature of what Samantha is claiming this time is drawing attention from people who are not, by any prior history, members of the Samantha Markle fan club. People who have been broadly sympathetic to Meghan's account of her family history, who have taken her side in disputes with her father and half-sister, who have given her the benefit of the doubt in the many moments where doubt was available to be given. Some of those people are now saying, quietly and with obvious discomfort, that Samantha's new claims deserve a more direct answer than they have received. That shift in tone among previously sympathetic observers is the detail that matters more than it first appears. Let's talk about what Samantha is actually alleging about Archie, because the story cannot be properly evaluated without understanding its content. Her claims center on what she describes as inconsistencies in the publicly available information surrounding Archie's early life, his birth, his documentation, the records that exist, or in her telling, do not exist in the form they should. She has alleged across multiple public statements that there are questions about these records that have not been satisfactorily answered, and that the answers, if and when they emerge, will materially alter the public understanding of Meghan's account of this period. She has been careful, and this carefulness is itself worth noting, to frame some of her claims in the language of questions rather than accusations, to say she is seeking answers rather than asserting conclusions. That framing offers her some protection legally and some deniability rhetorically. It also makes the claims harder to definitively refute, because a question, by its nature, does not carry the same evidentiary burden as a statement of fact. Now, what nobody talked about at the time was the context in which these specific claims are landing. They are arriving at a moment when Meghan Markle's public profile is in genuine flux. The post-royal reinvention that began so ambitiously with the Netflix deal and the memoir and the Oprah interview has encountered a more complicated middle chapter. Projects have shifted, the initial wave of sympathetic coverage has been replaced by something more mixed. The audience that once offered unconditional support has become somewhat more conditional in its enthusiasm. Into that environment, Samantha Markle drops claims about Archie. The timing is either coincidental or calculated, and those who believe it is the latter have noted that Samantha has demonstrated over the years a fairly sophisticated understanding of the media landscape and the moments when her interventions will receive maximum attention. Whether that sophistication represents cynical opportunism or genuine belief in the importance of what she is saying, that is a judgment each viewer will make for themselves based on what they already know of this family. Now, here is the moment where I want to step back from the claims themselves and spend a moment with the human beings at the center of this story. Because beneath the allegations and the counter-narratives and the legal history and the media positioning, there is a family story here that is genuinely painful. A father who became estranged from a daughter at the moment of her greatest public visibility. A half-sister who has spent years insisting on a connection that the other side of the family disputes. A woman who rose from relative obscurity to one of the most scrutinized positions on Earth in the space of a few years, and who has carried that scrutiny with varying degrees of grace and difficulty. Whatever you believe about Meghan Markle, and the women watching this have thought carefully about her for years, have formed nuanced and often conflicted views that resist easy summary, she is a person. A daughter, a mother, someone who grew up in a complicated family and has spent her adult life navigating the consequences of that complexity in front of a global audience that frequently forgets to extend her the basic humanity it extends to people whose stories are not performed on such a public stage. And Samantha Markle, whatever her motivations, is also a person. A woman who has watched her half-sister become one of the most famous people on Earth, while their relationship has deteriorated into public dispute and legal action. Whatever the truth of their shared history, the pain in that situation is real. The grief of a fractured family does not require a villain to be genuine. That humanity deserves acknowledgement, even here. Even in a story that has become so heavily freighted with allegation and counter-allegation that the human beings sometimes disappear entirely beneath the weight of the argument. But here is where we need to return to the question I placed at the beginning of this conversation, the detail that most people glossed over, the quiet, precise observation that looked one way at the time and looks different now. In the period surrounding Archie's birth and early life, there were several moments where the public record and the private account offered by Harry and Meghan diverged in ways that were noted at the time, briefly discussed, and then absorbed into the general background noise of Sussex coverage. Small inconsistencies, timeline questions, details that did not quite align in ways that most observers attributed to the inevitable messiness of life rather than anything more significant. Samantha Markle is now arguing that at least some of those inconsistencies were not the product of messiness, that they were the product of something more deliberate, and that the records she claims to have access to support that argument in ways that, if accurate, would require a significant re-examination of the publicly accepted narrative. Now, let's be honest about where we are. We cannot verify Samantha's claims. We cannot evaluate records we have not seen. We cannot assess the credibility of sources she has not named. What we can do is note that the claims have been made, that they have not been directly and specifically rebutted, and that they are being taken seriously by a broader range of observers than Samantha's previous allegations typically attracted. And we can hold that honestly alongside everything else we know. Samantha's history of hostile public statements toward Meghan, the failed defamation lawsuit, the pattern of escalating claims that has characterized her public presence for years, the documented unreliability of family members as sources in high-profile disputes. All of that context sits alongside the claims. It does not erase them, but it shapes how we receive them. What does Meghan's response, or the shape of its absence, tell us? In a legal sense, nothing. People have the right not to respond to allegations, particularly when the source is someone with a documented history of making hostile claims. Silence is not confession. It is not even necessarily strategy. Sometimes it is simply the exhaustion of someone who has been defending themselves against a particular opponent for so long that engaging once more feels like it costs more than it returns. But in the court of public perception, which is the court that matters most to a public figure whose career depends on maintaining trust and credibility, the texture of the non-response is being noted, not by the committed critics who would find fault regardless, by the genuinely uncertain observers who are watching to see how this is handled and drawing conclusions from the handling itself. There is a version of the story where Samantha Markle's claims are eventually disproven clearly and completely. The records she references are shown to be misunderstood or fabricated, and the episode becomes one more chapter in a long history of allegations that did not survive contact with the facts. That version is entirely possible. Given the history, some would say it is the most likely outcome. There is another version where the questions Samantha is raising eventually attract the kind of investigative attention that produces documented answers, whatever those answers turn out to be. And the public understanding of this particular chapter of the Sussex story shifts in some meaningful way. And there is a third version, perhaps the most probable of all, where the claims continue to circulate, never fully proven and never fully disproven, absorbed into the vast and contested mythology that surrounds Harry and Meghan, adding one more layer of complexity to a story that already has more layers than most people have the patience to work through carefully. What I would ask you to hold as you process this is the difference between a question and an answer. Samantha Markle has raised questions. She has not provided answers. The absence of a clear rebuttal from Meghan's team is noteworthy but not conclusive. The seriousness with which some observers are treating these questions is significant but not definitive. The honest position, given what we currently know, is uncertainty. And uncertainty in a media landscape that rewards certainty above almost everything else is an uncomfortable place to stand. But it is the honest place. What strikes me most about this moment, having followed this family story for as long as I have, is how much of it remains genuinely unresolved. Not because the truth does not exist somewhere, it always does, but because the machinery surrounding these people, on every side, is so powerfully incentivized to produce narrative rather than clarity. The critics need the story to confirm their prior view. The supporters need it to confirm theirs. The media needs it to continue generating the engagement that justifies the coverage. And somewhere inside all of that machinery are human beings who are living through something that none of the narratives quite captures honestly. Meghan Markle did not ask to become a symbol. She asked to marry the man she loved and build a life with him. What happened between that intention and this moment, the departure from the institution, the estrangement from the family, the public disclosure of private pain, and now the ongoing spectacle of her half-sister making claims about her eldest child, is a story that deserves more careful telling than it usually receives. I do not know whether Samantha Markle's claims about Archie are true, partially true, or entirely unfounded. I suspect the honest answer will not come quickly, if it comes at all. What I do know is this. The families we come from shape us in ways we spend our whole lives understanding. The wounds they leave do not heal on a timeline that suits anyone's narrative. And the public performance of private family pain, at the scale this family performs it, extracts a cost that no amount of platform or influence fully compensates for. Whatever the truth of what Samantha is claiming, and whatever the truth of Meghan's response to it, there are people in genuine pain at the center of this story. That matters, even when the headlines make it easy to forget. I would love to know what you think. Not what side you're on, but what you make of the question underneath all of it. Whether you believe the public has a right to answers about things that were made public in the first place, or whether you think the line between public narrative and private truth should be drawn somewhere that this coverage consistently fails to respect. Leave your thoughts below. This is the kind of conversation worth having properly.